Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. This is Andy Graham along with Ryan Carchi here at the Memorial Stadium press box. We're without our colleague Dustin DePirac, who is sorely missed, but he's participating in a wedding, not his own,
Not
but
his
is
own.
but is still a happy event. And it wasn't in the final analysis a happy event for Indiana football fans here today, with Penn State collecting the 16-10 victory, but I think it's fair to say that Indiana fans had more to be happy about today than they had a week ago.
Not quite the worst case scenario for sure. The defense, I guess, would be the one thing to look at and really be proud of, I guess, for this Indiana group, because especially guys like Jeff Thomas, guys like Lawrence Barnett, both of them
Really
came up with big games. Barnett really responded well to playing in man coverage, and Jeff Thomas had 3 tackles for loss. He had a sack. It was definitely both of their best performances of the game. And I mean, and the offense, I mean, they had their moments, I guess.
Yeah, they had their moments. They did some things early. Then they had about a 24-minute span from very early in the second quarter to well into the third quarter where they didn't get a first down. And there were some ample opportunities. The defense gave them the ball with good field position a couple of times. It was only 3-3 at halftime. The defense was hanging in there. It was an offensive turnover that gave Penn State a 6-3 lead to start the second half when a missed blocking assignment created a fumble. But the defense was hanging in there, and the offense just didn't take advantage well enough. But then with redshirt sophomore quarterback Dusty Keel making his first collegiate start with Ed Wright Baker sidelined with an ankle injury this week, they really made a run at it at the end. They went on a 17th play, I think it was 17 play, 73-yard drive with a Keel hitting Ted Bolzer with a 5-yard scoring pass.
On probably his best throw of the
Really
game.
nice play. It was only a 5-yard TD, but he zipped it in there.
He really did.
It was a little bit like Montana to Clark. Not quite, but it was a nice play. He made several plays, a couple of third down conversions, converted a fourth down pass to Max Dedman on that play, ran for a third scramble for a third down conversion.
And he had a completion percentage under 50%, but I wouldn't say that's his fault personally.
No.
I know his receivers dropped 6 balls today,
At least 6. That's
which
right.
is inexcusable, especially a guy like DeMarlo Belcher. You have a senior. He was open on most of these drops. He dropped 2 straight third down.
Yeah, it
third
would have
down
probably
passes,
been first down completions.
which
yeah.
would have probably been first downs. Ted Belser had a drop. Matt Perez had a drop.
And Jamon Chester, I think.
Jamon Chester had a drop, and the offensive line really wasn't giving Keel much time to throw anyway. So for what he had, I'd say Keel looked pretty poised, especially in that fourth quarter when he was kind of under the most pressure to perform. And,
Right.
And I'd say he graded out pretty well.
Yeah, I think he really grew as a college quarterback on those last couple of drives. He played reasonably solidly all day, but then he really, it was kind of like the North Texas game, really, when he came in the fourth quarter and Indiana looked DOA, but then he helped them rally to maybe even have a chance to win right at the very end. That's what happened again today. Indiana tried a Hail Mary from the 40 at the end. It wasn't his best throw of the day, but he had a guy in his face. And that was the main issue, once again, for IU, I think, was the complete lack of consistency and quality in terms of the offensive line play. They only averaged a little over 2 yards per rush. Dusty was running for his life most of the day.
Especially on the interior of the line. It was maybe, I mean, usually when you see a pass rush, it's coming from the defensive ends. The defensive tackles a lot of time were used to stop the run, but today it was exactly the opposite. I think it was Devin Still and Jordan Hill they were both in the backfield
Both of them have
nearly
been
every
playing really
play.
well all year. Both of those
Nearly
guys.
every play. Will Motti had maybe his worst game of
Yeah, Will, it's probably, without question, I would say, is Indiana's foremost offensive lineman, and certainly the leader up front. Had some issues. He had a chop block on the final drive that they had to overcome. That was a 15-yard penalty that they had to overcome. It would have been nice to have those 15 yards back at the end. So, there were some definite issues there. But overall, I think that, Indiana stood toe-to-toe with a team, a Big Ten opponent that's a legitimate foe, especially on defense. I mean, Buxer, the radio commentator, said it, and I think he's exactly right. He said that you could take an all-star selection from Indiana's first 4 opponents and still not have as good a defensive front 7 as Penn State put on the field today. And so that was part of the context in which Indiana's offensive line played. They were playing a very good defensive front, and I think that they had some issues. But I think there, as you say, I mean, especially with Dusty Keel and some of the other factors we saw late in the game, there were some reasons to get some encouragement. But the main impetus for any encouragement Indiana fans could draw from this game was, came on the defensive side, where they just played tough. They created turnovers. They were really good in the red zone. They stripped Red of a fumble inside the 3 and recovered it to thwart one threat. It was a bit of a break. It was a tip pass, but still Fareese Harden, a freshman, making his first start alongside his brother Drew. Both Harden started because of injuries at the safety position. He gets an interception at the goal line and takes it back out to the 21. Even the special teams, there was a punt, went off a Penn State player, and Indiana recovered. And we had Mitch Ewald contribute a 49-yard field goal. So there were a lot of things that Indiana could take away from the game feeling good about. But until and unless they solve some of those offensive line issues, it's going to be tough to win Big Ten ball games.
Yeah, that's where you build teams, especially in the Big Ten, is if you can't compete on the defensive line, which Indiana did today, and if you can't compete on the offensive line, which they didn't, then you're never going to beat big teams like Penn State. You're never going to compete with Wisconsin and Ohio State and those teams in the Big Ten who are huge up front and are going to pose a unique problem every time, because every time Dusty Keel was blitzed tonight, I mean, he stood no chance. There was no time. He couldn't roll out because they were blitzing from the outside, so he'd try to step up and he'd have to make a play as fast as he could, and usually that was an incomplete pass. So I guess the question I want to pose is, assuming Ed Wright Baker comes back next week, who starts at quarterback against
Well, it's
Illinois?
interesting. I mean, Kevin Wilson didn't, betray any thoughts about that necessarily. He just said, hey, we do expect Ed probably will be back next week. And do we have a quarterback controversy? Well, I don't know. We'll go through the week of practice and see what we see. And I mean, Dusty Keel said basically the same thing. He said, listen, Ed's a good friend of mine. And come next week, we'll just push each other every day in practice like we do every time, and then whatever happens, happens. And I really think that's kind of where we are. I mean, I think that either one of them can play. Either one of them might start, depending on who does well. And I'm glad you brought up the blitzing, because that was one thing I meant to get to my column that I forgot to stick in. One of the few issues that I think remain defensively for Indiana right now, after they played such a good second half at North Texas and a pretty good solid ball game all day today, would be that they really, really telegraph blitzes. And the blitz package is important. I mean, it's something that Indiana needs to get better pressure on the quarterback. They need to create more sacks. And I don't know why, but every time they got something called, their guys seem to be over anxious. It doesn't take very long into the snap count before you see guys moving up or stepping up, or if you have a defender on a guy in the slot who's going to come off the edge, he starts coming off his guy. The quarterback sees it.
If you don't have that element of surprise, there's no reason to even blitz.
Because the other team picks it up and they can adjust their protection, and that's an issue. And there's a lot of sort of minor things like that need to happen defensively. But at least Indiana looks like they're making some progress on that kind of on that side of the ball. And they'll be tested again next week by, I think, a very good Illinois offense here at Memorial Stadium.
It'll be an important game for Indiana's quarterback, whoever it may be, to show up. I think as far as the quarterback controversy or whatever it will be now goes, is Dusty Keel's going to give you something. I feel like what you're going to get out of Dusty Keel. With Ed Wright Baker, he may not be as poised as Dusty Keel will be, but at the same time, he's more athletic. He can probably provide bigger plays. He's got a better arm throwing deep. That's been obvious. It was kind of obvious today, seeing Dusty throw deep, and it was obvious in the preseason to Coach Wilson. So I'm not really sure where they're going to go. I don't know which one's the right choice, but
We'll see what
I
we see.
guess we'll see.
And well, thanks a lot for listening. As always, safe travels to you, Dust, if you happen to tune in, and we'll be checking in with you next week. Thanks as always.
Thanks a lot.